clear there. Trump is at his most desperate and unpredictable moment of his presidency so far. And that means he is also at his most dangerous. Nobody knows that better than Miles Taylor, and he joins me next. This week, we learned the Trump administration is planning to withhold key national security funding from states that do not go along with his scheme to fundamentally change the rules of how we vote. Former Trump White House official turned whistleblower Miles Taylor writes about that threat today in a new piece titled, "If You Live in a Blue State, Donald Trump Just Put a Gun to Your Head." It's quite a piece. We'll share it with you, too. Now, joining me now is Miles Taylor. He was chief of staff in the Department of Homeland Security during Donald Trump's first term. Miles, you always have a way with words. That is a chilling way to describe what states are facing right now. But tell us what you mean.
Well, look, I want folks to imagine for a second, Jen, that you call 911, and usually they answer the phone and they say, 911, what's your emergency? What if you dialed those numbers and they said, 911, how'd you vote in the last election? Or 911, are you a registered Democrat or Republican? I mean, we joke, but this is what the federal government is doing right now. I mean, I oversaw these funds at DHS. You spent a lot of time in the last administration talking about natural disasters, terrorist attacks, emergencies. This was it. This was the pot of money that helped states and localities protect their people against terrorist attacks and mass shootings and cyber attacks and weaponized drones. And now the federal government is saying, basically to people in blue states, if you don't go along with Donald Trump's election schemes, which are themselves, by the way, unconstitutional. That's a separate issue. Judges have been ruling against them. But they're saying if you don't go along, you're not going to get the money to protect your people. You're going to get a huge cut, and you're not going to be able to defend human lives in your territory. It is unconscionable for them to do this. And I'll add one more thing, Jen. It's also illegal for them to do this. And we've got recent precedent for that because they've already tried similar things since Trump came back into office, and judges have body slammed them for trying to do it. But here they are again.
I mean, and judges may continue, hopefully, they will continue to body slam him because it is illegal, as you said. What you know these programs so well. What advice would you give to governors, mayors, others who are trying to fight this in the immediate term, maybe before it works through its court system? What can they be doing? What should they be doing?
If there is any governor watching right now, anyone on a governor's staff, any attorney general in a state across the country, I'm going to tell you right now, go sue the Trump administration. You are on incredibly safe ground to sue them over this. They have broken the law by doing this. And I'll tell you specifically, I'll save you some time on the legal research. The Administrative Procedures Act sounds kind of boring, but the Administrative Procedures Act basically says you can't do things like this if they're not tied to the original purpose of the money. The spending clause in the United States Constitution. Judges have struck down efforts from the Trump administration to dangle emergency aid and public safety aid on this spending clause of the Constitution. They did it on immigration. Last year, just last year, the Trump administration tried to say to states, abide by our immigration policies. And if you don't, we're going to take your FEMA money away. And guess what? Federal judges said, no, that's illegal under the APA. It's illegal under the Constitution's spending clause. That's where states right now, if they're not already, should be spinning up their litigation against this. But it's worse than what happened last year, Jen, because, again, as we talked about, they're putting lives in danger here. They don't care if people die in disasters. They just want the president to be able to influence elections. That is weaponization of emergency aid if we have ever seen it in this country.
It's interesting. Your advice sounds very similar to what Jack Smith told Nicole Wallace last week about fighting, which is sue them and be creative about it, essentially, because the law is really on your side in so many cases. You just touched on this, but let's just a bigger picture here, because it seems to me like Trump keeps losing in the courts because he can't seem to get the SAVE Act passed. He doesn't have the votes in the Senate. Who knows what's happening in the House? He's basically resorting to extortion, right? Where does it go from here? Where does your mind go in terms of what steps he's going to try next? Because I know you've thought about it.
Well, look, he's put a lot of them on the table. When it comes to the election, I'm worried he's going to take Fulton County and what happened in Fulton County with FBI agents going in and seizing ballots and putting that on steroids. And he's trying to lay the predicate for that. He's trying to lay the predicate. That's why he's doing this with the FEMA aid. He wants the states to give him their voter rolls so he can say that his administration went through the voter rolls and they found fraud and they found people, pretending to be voters, but they were really dead. Say whatever they want to say, so that they can then justify sending in federal law enforcement to seize ballots. That's what's happening here. That's plain as day. It's not conspiracy theory. That's why it makes it so important for these states to fight. But there's another piece here, Jen. If MAGA supporters happen to wander into our conversation right now, I want them to know that this creates a very scary precedent for them in the future if a Democratic president comes in and says, fine, let's do this. Because what the Trump administration has done has turned emergency aid into a slush fund. And I want Republicans to think about in the future whether they want a Democratic president deciding whether or not red states get emergency aid. That is what is at stake here.
Let's hope none would ever do that. But fair point, Miles Taylor, thank you as always. We'll be right back.